Good morning. I'm Kim Chappell, and I'm your worship associate today. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this progressive spiritual community where we come together to nourish the spirit, connect in love, and act for justice. At UUCL, as we like to refer to ourselves, love is our only doctrine, and service and justice are our most sacred prayers. So we pray by striving to live lives in words and deeds that affirm that Black lives matter. And our doctrine of love has moved us to affirm for decades that love is divine and love is what makes a family. This Unitarian Universalist congregation is a place where we come to learn more about being human. We're not here because we've figured out life's questions or because we think we've got it right. We welcome all of you to our service, especially those of you who are searching for a spiritual home. Many of us were once too, seeking for something larger than ourselves to which we could belong, a sense of rootedness to hold us as we create meaning together. We do that here, though not perfectly. In this congregation, we strive not for perfection, but for authenticity and connection. So whether it's your first time here with us or your 100th time, we hope that you'll find questions here that stretch you, people to befriend you, and progressive spiritual values that challenge you to join us in loving boldly, living justly, and welcoming radically. I now invite us to enter sacred space as Reverend Israel lights our chalice, beloved symbol of our Unitarian Universalist movement. Out of the flames of fear, we rise with courage of our deepest convictions to stand for justice, inclusion, and peace. Out of the flames of scrutiny, we rise to proclaim our faith with hope to heal a fractured and hurting world. Out of the flames of doubt, we rise to embrace the mystery, wonder, and awe of all there is and all that is yet to be. Out of the flames of hate, we rise with the force of love, love that celebrates our shared humanity. Out of the flames, we rise.
Thank you, Kim. Welcome, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you all here to the space too. I am Reverend Israel. You see him for, and I'm the minister of this congregation. And it's so lovely to see so many of you here this morning, whether you rose early or just a few minutes ago. We are glad that you've chosen to spend some time with us in this space. In this space of spirituality and intentionality and discovery, this space of becoming who we must become for all of us. On this Sunday morning, the day before Valentine's Day, we focus together on how we can, all of us in this community, together be creating a more just, loving, and beautiful community. A more just, loving, and beautiful world, too. And so we come together here to ask questions about what that means, about how to do that. And I hope for us this morning that we discover that what it means to be building a more just, loving, and beautiful world means that we are creating a world where each of us, all of us, are able to feel more alive, more in touch, more authentically connected to our higher selves, more authentically connected to the essence that is at our core, and more authentically connected to each other for that is how we enter into this process. Love is most powerful when it enables us to see and know each other for who we are. And when it does not let us get away with striving to be better, with striving to push ourselves to grow, striving to push ourselves to learn from our mistakes, to learn from our imperfections, and to know that despite our imperfections, we keep coming back to the table, keep coming back to each other, because we believe firmly that something new, something more just, and something more loving is possible. So thank you for showing up today. Because I think by your showing up, it shows me that at least some small part of you believes that too. So let's journey together this morning. Will you come sing a song with me that ennobles our hearts and minds to discover the infinity that is within us and discover the love that we are always striving for together?
Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me. Come walk in rain with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me. Come share a rose with me, that I might know your mind. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time.
We bring so many things here to this place when we gather. So many things from our lives, so many joys, sorrows, complex truths, things that are weighing on our hearts, things that break our hearts, and things that give them wings and fill us with joy. Part of the practice of community is to remind ourselves that we don't have to carry that brokenness and that weight all by ourselves. And that we do not have to keep our joys to ourselves either. Because when we share them with each other, we see them multiplied in the many faces and hearts and minds of those we are gathered with. And we also find perhaps that when we gather in community, we allow ourselves the time to make space to process and to discover the complex truths that are still in formation in our hearts, and that it can be powerful to name them out loud. So I invite you now, whether this is your first, 5th, or 500th time that you've come here, that if you carry a joy, a sorrow, a complex truth on your heart today, that you are invited to share it with us, to share it for us and for yourself. When you do, I'll drop a stone into our well for you, for your joy, sorrow, or complex truth. So then you know you are held. And the way that you share it, if you do not know, is you type it into our chat on Zoom or on Facebook in 15 words or less, and we'll read it aloud for you. And I'll drop a stone into our well so that you know that you are held here in this community. For all of those things that we carry out loud, the things that we have experienced, the things that are still in process, and the ones that are still in the silent sanctuaries of our hearts because words simply cannot express. For all of who we are, all of these myriad experiences of life that we bring here, I drop this final stone into our well, reminding us of the brilliant, beautiful, and broken complexity of life and of community. Reminding us that we are all held together in this well. Reminding us all that there is still more space for all that we bring. I invite you to take some time with me now to pause, to be present to all that you are carrying this morning, to be present to the joys, sorrows, and complexities in your own heart. To be present to each other. Some call this turning inward or this turning towards as a moment of prayer. Some refer to it as such. And I was reminded this morning of the words of Meister Eckhart when I was listening to actually an interview with John O'Donohue. I was reminded by the words of Meister Eckhart, who said that people often ask how we should pray. And that the true response to that question is not how ought we to pray or how should we pray, if you even call it prayer. But the true question is, how should we be? How should we make space for turning our attention towards the things that are most important? And I was reminded further by the words of Meister Eckhart that there is a place in the soul that neither time nor space nor any created thing can touch. That there is a place in all of your hearts that is steady and solid and always has been throughout your life. What this means is that you and your identity and what you carry is not simply the equivalent of your accumulated experience, of all the joys, sorrows, and complex truths that you experience in your life, of all the struggles and the pain that you endure in life, but rather that there is a place in yourself from the very beginning up until now that is constant, that has never been wounded, that is always whole. That there is an inner peace and tranquility and confidence and source of love in you and all of us. And it is always there. And so the task of this thing that we call prayer is to be quiet and still enough so that we can find it and remind ourselves that it is always there for us, no matter what is going on outside of us or inside of us. To remind us that that thing that exists at our core, at our heart center, is the spark of connection and love that we must return to see how things truly are in this world. I'll end this prayer with one final image. Picture yourself as if you were floating on top of an ocean, a stormy sea with huge waves rocking you from side to side, tossing you about through life. Those waves, that wave, is the complexity of being alive. And it is the task of the spiritual life, of the spiritual pursuit, to allow ourselves to dive deep beneath the tumultuous surface of that wave and see that when you go beneath the surface of the ocean, there is still movement, but there is a beautiful depth. And we realize that when we go beneath the surface, that we are surrounded by this water that connects us to everything, that holds everything, that surrounds us in love.
What wondrous love is this, O my soul, O my soul? What wondrous love is this, O my soul? What wondrous love is this that brings my heart such bliss and takes away the pain of my soul, and takes away the pain of my soul. When I was sinking down, sinking down, sinking down. When I was sinking down, sinking down. When I was sinking down beneath my sorrow's ground, friends to me gathered round, O my soul, O my soul. Friends to me gathered round, and to all friends I will sing, I will sing. To love and to all friends I will sing. To love and to all friends who pain and sorrows mend, with thanks unto the end I will sing, I will sing. With thanks unto the end I will sing.
So we are here this week to continue our discussion of widening the circle of concern, which we began our processing and discussion and orienting ourselves towards last week. And well, I want to say that what I think I said last week, which this dealing with this widening the circle of concern, which is the UUA's report put out by the Commission on Institutional Change to help us as Unitarian Universalists see what we must become for our future and for all of us, for everyone. That this is essentially very simply put, it's a practice in widening our circle of love, widening our circle of concern, widening our circle of love. It's a process of discovering and turning our attention to the structures and imbalances of power that exists not just in Unitarian Universalism, but in our wider culture, in our country, and even our world. That it is not about seeing ourselves as bad individuals, but as seeing ourselves as deeply and structurally connected to this culture that we are in. And so it's our task to dig below the surface, to see how things truly are, and to root out not only from our individual lives, but from our communal lives and from our very society, the systems and structures of oppression that exist. But it's not about just rooting those things out. It's about trying to seek how we can heal ourselves and heal our communities to make space for everyone. That this is at its core also a process of healing. So as we continue to talk about these things, I ask you to think about what is the process of healing, or where are the places of healing that we are called to go in this work? I think part of what we're trying to do too, and this is what I think I talked about last week as well, but I want to reiterate because I think it's so important, is that what we are trying to do is shift ourselves from seeing ourselves as individuals who exist in a society, and to shift ourselves from being part of an individualistic culture to more of a collectivist culture. Remember last week I talked about how we see ourselves in wisdom and truth and knowledge and understanding as being part of this ever-moving, ever-flowing circle. That is, it's really hard to draw a circle backwards, like with the camera when it's reversed. That we are part of this continuing circle, this continuing wave, a movement. That we are all like, that our lives are like waves in the sea that arise up and then they fall back into the sea and become one with the sea. And one way to think about that I want to present to you today as we go into this discussion is that part of this is about getting ourselves to see things differently or to perceive things differently in the world. Because most of us who are raised in the United States, or the culture here in this country is a deeply individualistic culture. That doesn't mean that there aren't cultures of collectivism that exist in this country. But the overall culture, the dominant narrative, the dominant culture here is a culture of individualism. And that is the message that we are constantly having reinforced to us. And so the way we see the world is one way. It is through the lens of individualism and rugged individualism in many ways. And we're trying to get ourselves to see that we are part of something and that we see it one way, but we can see it, we need to be able to see it from a different perspective, a different angle with a different lens. So one way you can think about this is if you take your finger, and you can try it with me if you want to. So if you take your finger and you raise it up and you look at the sky or the ceiling and you start moving your finger clockwise, so the way that a clock moves. So it's spinning clockwise, you're looking up at it from below, and your finger is spinning clockwise. Now our culture sort of tells us to view the world this way, that we are spinning clockwise, that we are individuals spinning clockwise, going this way, and this is the way things truly are. But if you start to continue spinning your finger clockwise and lower it down until it is below you and continue spinning it the same way. And you notice that once it is below your sight line, if you're looking down at it, it's no longer spinning clockwise, but it's spinning counterclockwise. To be able to see that change in perspective, you didn't have to change the essence of your finger did not change. It was still doing the same thing. But you were just able to finally view it from a different perspective in a different way. So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to change that lens or that perspective of how we look at things, to see that they can be and must be different. And that there are multiple different ways of seeing things. Widening the circle, too, I propose for us, is not about making space at the table for people who aren't already here. It's about changing the structure of the table itself. And it's also, like I said, about love. It's about willingness to enter. So with that finger spinning, the perspective thing that I was just telling you about, what I propose to us today is that love, what love truly is, and that's what this is about, like I said, is about being willing or developing the willingness or the ability to enter into the inner longings, desires, and hopes and dreams and struggles of people who are not ourselves, of people outside of our own narrow scope of understanding, of spending time in our collective hearts, in the collective hearts of others, not just ourselves, and letting the time that we spend in those spaces change us. Letting it change us, change our understanding of separateness. And ultimately letting it change how we move and live and exist in the world. However, while perspective matters, experiences, individual experiences can differ. I can say that we are all truly one essence, that we are all truly interconnected, but individual people's experiences, the privileges and the oppressions and the intersections of those things that they experiences are different, based on identities that are put on certain people, put on ourselves when we move about in the world. That is how people often see each other, is through the identities that they can visually see or experience. And those truly, whether or not we are interconnected or whether we are all the same, those identities that we place upon each other have a difference. They make a difference in the lives and in the privilege that people experience. And so we have to realize that those things matter too. And so I want to talk just a little bit more about that, because much of what the Widening the Circle of Concern report is on is about how those identities that we place on each other have an effect on how we come together in community. And it's about how people in positions of privilege and power, people who carry more power because of the identity that they carry, namely white people, are able to feel the negative effects of identity less. They experience their experiences well, here in Unitarian Universalism, because that is the dominant culture that has existed from our history, that they feel those effects less here in this space and in our wider culture as well. So it was what this is really about too. I think that reading this report together and discussing it together is about being able to tell truth to each other about how things are. And so it was Ta-Nehisi Coates said, the people, and so if we truly love Unitarian Universalism, but believe that it can be better, we need to be honest with ourselves about how it is, about the truth of this faith that we have, about the truth of our history. And so Ta-Nehisi Coates says, the people who love you don't blow smoke up your backside. They don't do that. They tell you hard truths. They love you. If something's gone wrong, my wife's going to tell me. If something's going wrong, I'm going to tell her. That's the nature of relationship. And it could also be said that that's the end of the quote, to encouraging someone to be entirely themselves is the loudest way to love them. And both of those things can be true at the same time, of telling someone the truth out of love, and also allowing someone to be fully themselves. Revealing how truth and the self can be part of a whole, and that love is about releasing that sense of ego too. Now, the way that I think that all this stuff kind of comes together in the Widening the Circle of Concern report, especially when it comes to racial identity, is best explained through the idea of white fragility. And if you've never heard this term before, it's basically a way for us to understand how fragile whiteness is as an ego thing, and how it prevents white people from being able to hear the truth and to know the truth, and to spend some of the privilege that they have in the service of love, in the service of making space, in the service of living into our values of who we truly say we want to be. So a lot of this white fragility, a lot of thought on it comes from a woman named Robin DiAngelo, who you may have heard of. And she talks about white fragility and how it is the beliefs that prevent white people from seeing racism as a system. And so if you have white fragility, if you are a white person, you're more inclined to see yourself as being separate from racism, as being separate from a system of racism. And it's backed by two core beliefs. And this is something that I see a lot in Unitarian Universalism too, which is many people carry this belief that only truly deplorable people can be racist or do racist things. And that racism is always a conscious, active hatred that people have. So it allows white people to turn their attention away from the fact that it's the system of structured, fundamentally imbalanced power that is where racism comes from. It is not anyone's individual actions. And that anyone in that, as part of that system, can be connected to it, whether or not they actively carry that hatred or not. That it is something that, because you are part of this culture, that is embedded in you from your birth. And the key takeaway that I want folks to understand from that, if you're not familiar with this concept, is that intentions are irrelevant. And that when actions that white people do are called out as being racist, there are some key ways that people often respond, especially people in progressive circles or in liberal circles. There are reactions to those calling outs that say, you know, something like, "How dare you suggest that I could have said or done something racist?" That is a very common response to it. And this shows, this really prevents white folks from truly entering into a meaningful dialogue for it makes it impossible sometimes to engage in necessary dialogue and self-reflection. And Robin DiAngelo, in some of her workshops that she gives, says that she often asks people of color, "How often have you given white people feedback on, how often have you given white people feedback on or unaware, So she asked people of color how often when they've given white people feedback on the racist things that they've done, and how well did that go for them when they gave white people that feedback. And she says that often when she asks that question, she's met with sort of eye rolling or head shaking, or sometimes even just laughter at the absurdity of the question. And the consensus is that it never goes particularly well. And then she asks these people of color, what would it be like if you could simply give white people feedback and have white people graciously receive it, reflect, and work to change the behavior? And she said that one particular comment that she got that stood out in her mind was that it would be revolutionary. And so that, I think, is my long-winded way of saying that is what we are trying to do. Is trying to change the perspective of what it means to be racist and who can be racist. And how to say that we exist in a culture of white supremacy, that does not mean that it is made up of terrible, horrible people who do racist things. It just means that we have to be self-reflective about that culture. And that to do so could be revolutionary. And it reminds us of how actually fragile whiteness is as a thing. If it is revolutionary, if this comment that it would be revolutionary for white people to simply take responsibility for those things. Now, why are we even talking about all of these things? For me, it's because I love Unitarian Universalism. And even though I think that Unitarian Universalism can be fragile in the same way that white identity can be fragile, and that individual UUs can be fragile in their own white identity, that I truly believe that we can do something better here in this community together. By talking about all this stuff, by wrestling with it, by acknowledging how it exists in our culture and in our community and in our congregation, we are creating something that I think has the potential to be revolutionary. Because the practice of wrestling with racism in our society is already happening. Change is already happening here and outside of Unitarian Universalism. It's not just UUs working on this stuff. And so we have a choice. We have a choice, I think, to allow ourselves to change, allow ourselves to wrestle with the change that we must wrestle with, or else to see our congregations, to see our faith as something that is dying. Maybe something that should come to an end if we can't grow and change in the ways that we need to. If we can't do that, if we can't wrestle with those things that truly matter, then we can't be who we say we are. And maybe we shouldn't continue to exist. Now, I don't want that to be the case, and I imagine most of you don't either. But it's a truth that needs to be said. And so I recently listened to a talk from Sophia Betancourt, who is a UU theologian, UU minister, and was one of the interim co-presidents of the UUA. And she said something that I think is really profound. And I think it gets to the core, again, of what we're trying to do here. She said, our soul's longing is for our faith to be relevant, so it can save lives like it has saved ours. That's what this is about. This is about this faith remaining relevant, not just simply so that it can exist into the future for the sake of existing, not so that this congregation can exist into the future for the sake of preserving a building or for the sake of preserving a social club, but for the sake of this faith existing to be truly relevant to this world. This is about whether or not we have something to say that matters, about whether or not we can speak to the issues of our time, about whether we are moving ourselves and our community towards a world that is really, truly transformative and liberatory, and that brings more love, and that frees everyone. It's about whether or not we say who we are. It's about whether or not we are who we say we profess to be. Whether or not we are a faith that cares only about the freedom of individual people to believe whatever they want to believe, or whether or not we are a faith that cares more about the freedom of every individual to exist without threat of violence, whether or not we are a faith that cares about the freedom of everyone to form and be formed by beloved community. That's what this is about. It's not about how many people are logged onto the Zoom screens or who show up in the pews. It's about how many people show up on Zoom or in the pews who show up, and whether or not, excuse me, not about how many people show up. Okay, let me put it this way. If showing up on Zoom or sitting in the pews doesn't equip you to be a better person and to meet the challenges of the world, to meet where the world is calling us, then I'm not doing my job. If showing up in community doesn't support you or encourage you to learn and to grow and to realize the urgency of this thing that we are striving towards, this beloved community thing that we are striving towards, if you don't encourage yourselves to do that, then I don't think we're truly fulfilling our purpose or our mission. If we can't put our attention and our intention where it really matters, to learn how to treat everyone better, to be present to each other, to have conversations that matter, to read the reports that show us how, and to step aside from our sense of ego that wants to protect us and wants to tell us that we are not bad people. None of you are bad people. I love you. I think all of you are lovable. I think that community is valuable. I think that showing up together and knowing that we're not alone is valuable. I think this place ought to exist into the future. I think that it can. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother with trying. I think that we can do better. And I think that we have to allow ourselves to be uncomfortable, to grow and change. I love you. And in many ways, I could say that you are perfect just the way that you are. Kind of like how I said at the beginning in the prayer of when we dive deep below the surface of the ocean, or we dive deep into our hearts, we know that there is a place that is untouched and unchanged, that is beautiful and lovable and perfect just the way that it is. And that thing is perhaps the love that connects us all, that exists in all of us. But when we rise back up to the surface of experience of everyday life, the sea can be stormier. Let me put it this final way. During the pandemic, a lot of people said that we were all in the same boat together. Maybe some of you have heard that expression. And a great retort to that was that we are not all in the same boat together. We are all experiencing the same storm. Maybe some of you have heard that. Some people are in fancy yachts. Some people are in little dinghies, small canoes. Some people are drowning. It's our job together to brave that storm together and to build a better boat so that everyone can fit on it, so that everyone can be safe. We can't make life perfect. We can't take away all the pain and suffering in the world, but we can build this boat together. So my friends, I do love you, and you should love yourselves. And on some deep fundamental level, we are all perfect and lovable. But now it's our time to change and to grow. And so let's have some conversation about that.
Spirit of life, come unto me, sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
We now take an offering as an outward expression of our interdependence. You can support our work as you're able by texting the amount of your donation to the number on the screen or through the Contribute tab on our website at UUCLonline.org. We share half of our offering this month with the Crispus Attucks Community Center, which strives to improve the quality of life for youth and families in Lancaster by providing services that promote community prosperity, physical and mental health, and by offering programs and cultural events which preserve the African American heritage. Thank you.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Questions that I invite you to consider. I would invite anyone who did read some of the sections of Widening the Circle to kind of talk first and maybe just give some of your reactions to what you read. And what commitments it has provoked in you. I know you don't want me to keep talking, so I'm gonna